Hey, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of the Written Word podcast. So, a while ago, I asked online on our church Facebook page, I think it was, a book of the Bible. I gave a few options and a book of the Bible for me to go through on a podcast that I was going to be doing. Well, this is it. This is the Written Word podcast, and all that this is going to be walking through a book of the Bible, uh, uh, methodically, and sometimes we'll be going quickly, sometimes we'll be going slowly, depending on time and what makes sense with the book and all of that kind of thing. This one, I plan on doing this every couple of weeks. Okay, so it's not going to be like a weekly thing. And hands down, the book that was chosen was Lamentations. So that'll be the first thing that we're going to walk through in this podcast series is Lamentations. And before we jump into the actual book, even, I wanted to take an episode and just do some introductory things, so that we kind of know the setting for Lamentations. So Lamentations isn't like the Psalms, in which there are tons and tons and tons of different settings depending on the time and the place and the author and all of those things. Lamentations has one setting, and it was written by the prophet Jeremiah, and it is essentially five poems, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But essentially, it's five poems that Jeremiah wrote as Jerusalem fell to Babylon, and he's lamenting that very thing, all of the terror and horror that was going on around him and at the time, and the devastation that was left during that time. So that's really what the setting is of Lamentations. But just to put it into perspective, imagine for a moment walking through Dickinson when we've been besieged and under attack for a while, and then one day, like, it's all over, and one day you just wake up and you walk outside of your home, if it's still there, and there's just devastation. All sorts of horrific things have happened. You see bodies in the streets. Our church has been completely destroyed and leveled. All of the places of worship in town have been destroyed and leveled, and it's just a terrible, terrible thing. This is kind of where Lamentations begins, in that sort of setting. So maybe something that is more identifiable would be if we had some. So it's raining as I'm recording this, and it's actually a beautiful thing when we get rain here. But so as I'm recording this, it's raining, and so it makes me think of maybe a more applicable thing for us to think about, to kind of put ourselves at least in a place where we can think about devastation. Now, this isn't even close to the devastation that Jeremiah would have been seeing around him, but it is something. So imagine for a moment that we have received a forecast, and it's going to be stormy, and you go to bed in the evening, and there is, the siren goes off. If you could even hear it, you probably could only hear it if you're, on the same block as the thing, if it's thunderstorming. But the siren goes off. You hear car horns honking as people are driving by on their way home, alerting everyone that can hear the horn. And then it's all just a blur. And then the morning comes, and you walk out of part of a home that you have left, and everything has just been leveled, and people are dead, and just that kind of devastation. And then think about just the immediate sorrow and difficulty and just pain and anguish that would be going on in your heart and in your mind at the moment. It would actually be so bad, it'd be hard to compute what was going on. And that's really the kind of thing, only it gets much worse as we think about what all happened at the this fall of Jerusalem at the time and captivity of Judah. It was much worse. It was much worse than this. So Lamentations is really going to be about walking through sorrow with Scripture, with God as our guide. It's going to be about hope in Christ through honest lamentation. And so hopefully this will be a helpful thing for you as we walk through this book together. The historical setting, as I've said, is what happened to Jerusalem in particularly in the year 586 BC is when the fall of Jerusalem happened. Babylon had besieged the city. You can see more of this. Let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 25. Let me get that over on the screen here. 2 Kings chapter 25, and this is what it says, beginning in verse 1. Now in the 9th year of his reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his military force, against Jerusalem. And he camped against it and built a siege wall around it. So the city came under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was so strong in the city that there was no food for the people of the land. Then the city was broken into, and all the men of war fled by night, by way of the gate between the two walls beside the king's garden. Though the Chaldeans were all around the city, and they went by way of the Arabah, but the military force of the Chaldeans pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho, and all his military force was scattered from him. Then they seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah, and they spoke their judgment on him. And they slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah, so the king's sons, before his eyes. Then he blinded the eyes of Zedekiah and bound him with bronze fetters and brought him to Babylon. Now on the 7th day of the 5th month, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and he burned the house of Yahweh, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, even every great house he burned with fire. So all the military force of the Chaldeans, who were with captain of the guard, tore down the walls around Jerusalem. Then the rest of the people who were left in the city, and the defectors who had defected to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the multitude, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took away into exile. But the captain of the guard left some of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and plowmen. Now the bronze pillars which were in the house of Yahweh, and the stands, and the bronze sea which were in the house of Yahweh, the Chaldeans shattered and carried the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, the shovels, the snuffers, the spoons, and all the bronze vessels which were used to minister. The captain of the guard also took away the fire pans and the bowls, what was fine gold and what was fine silver, the 2 pillars, the 1 sea, and the stands which Solomon had made for the house of Yahweh. The bronze of all these vessels was beyond weight. The height of the 1 pillar was 18 cubits, and a bronze capital was on it. The height of the capital was 3 cubits, with a network and pomegranates on the capital all around, all of bronze. And the 2nd pillar was like these, with network. Then the captain of the guard took Seraiah and the chief priest, and Zephaniah, the second priest, with the 3 doorkeepers of the temple. And from the city he took 1 official who was overseer of the men of war, and 5 of the king's advisors who were found in the city, and the scribe of the commander of the army who mustered the people of the land. and 60 men of the people of the land who were found in the city. And Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, took them and led them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. Then the king of Babylon struck them down and put them to death at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah went into exile from its land. So that is, so that was a lot of reading. But if you followed, there was a lot of devastation that happened during that time in Jerusalem and throughout Judah, but particularly as we think about Jerusalem. And Lamentations is written from the perspective of Jeremiah, who survives this. Many people didn't survive. I mean, there were a lot of people who died, a lot of people who were just slaughtered during the whole thing. A lot of people you could say, read who would have starved. There was no food, and that's really when they were able to bust in, because people were starving. To the point that in Lamentations chapter 4 verse 10, it even here, I'll just go there real quick. It says, the hands of compassionate women boiled their own children. They became food for them because of the destruction of the daughter of my people. That's nuts, right? Like, that is so difficult. Let's read from the actual book of Jeremiah, chapter 39. This is more about the capture of Jerusalem. So this is from Jeremiah chapter 39. Now when Jerusalem was captured in the 9th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all his military force came to Jerusalem and laid siege to it. In the 11th year of Zedekiah, in the 4th month, and the 9th day of the month, the city was breached. Then all the officials of the king of Babylon came in and sat down at the middle gate. Words that I'm not going to try to pronounce at the moment. So these are officials with Babylon. It happened when Zedekiah, king of Judah, and all the men of war saw them, they fled and went out of the city. So this was such a major event that the warriors of Israel took off. They were frightened and beat down, and they fled. Just, I mean, think about the situation. The difficulty of what was happening. It's actually something that we can't fathom. Like a lot of things in this life, I'm not a person that would advocate for standpoint epistemology, which is a fancy way to kind of say, if you haven't gone through it, then you'll never understand, and you need to listen to what I have to say about it because I went through this thing. I don't think that that's right. I think certainly there's a sense in which we can not fully grasp the difficulty of what Jeremiah witnessed, along with others who survived and who were taken into captivity and on all of that. So certainly we would not be able to identify, right? But we have all felt the same emotions that they would have felt. We've all felt loss. We've all felt, terror maybe, and other things. And so, so this isn't something that we can completely fathom. Even though we do understand what it means to need to lament. And so that's really what this is going to be like. That there are theological dimensions to what is happening here. This is, of course, Jeremiah's kind of firsthand grief as an eyewitness of these things, but there are also theological dimensions to it. So this isn't just a political catastrophe. This was covenantal judgment, actually. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28. This is covenantal judgment. This is a famous text in Deuteronomy where there are blessings and curses for keeping Israel's side of the covenant. Right? There are blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. of the commandments that God has given. Now, it'll be if you diligently listen to the voice of Yahweh your God and do all of these things, Yahweh your God will set you high above all the nations. All these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you listen to the voice of Yahweh your God. And he talks about all of these blessings. And then, let's see, scroll. Abounding in prosperity and all of these promises that the Lord makes to them. And then in verse 15 it says, "But it will be if you do not listen to the voice of Yahweh your God to keep and to do all his commandments and his statutes with which I am commanding you today, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. Cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the field. Cursed shall your basket and your kneading bowl, or shall be your basket and your kneading bowl. Cursed shall be the offspring of your body and the produce of your ground, the increase of your flock, your herd, and the young of your flock. Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. Yahweh will send upon you the curse, confusion, and rebuke in all that you send forth your hand to do, until you are destroyed and until you perish quickly on account of the evil of your deeds, because you have forsaken me. Yahweh will make the pestilence cling to you until he has consumed you from the land where you are entering to possess it. Yahweh will strike you with consumption and with fever and with inflammation and with fiery heat and with the sword and with scorching wind and mildew, and they'll pursue you until you perish. And the heaven which is over your head shall be bronze, and the earth which is under you iron. Yahweh will make the rain of your land powder and dust. From heaven it shall come down on you until you are destroyed. Yahweh shall cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will go out one way against them, but you will flee 7 ways before them. And you will become an example of terror to all the kingdoms of the earth. And your carcasses will be food to all birds. And I mean, this is getting dark, right? This is, it goes on, right? These curses for disobedience. The covenant was one that could be broken by Israel, and it was over and over and over and over again. They spurned God. They disobeyed the Lord, and many of the things that they did, they worshipped other gods. They became like the people of the land that they were to go be witnesses to, and so there were a lot of things that happened there, and so that's really what was going on here. It's covenantal judgment that is taking place in Lamentations. And so again, Jeremiah is the one that wrote it. I should say at the outset that that's really an early Jewish tradition. So we don't maybe technically know that Jeremiah is the author, but it is in the Septuagint. So the Greek translation of the Old Testament, in the Septuagint, Jeremiah is credited with it. And so I think it's a safe assumption Jeremiah is the author. That's why I say it like that. The style and the theme seems like it's Jeremiah as well. And this is likely written shortly after this fall of Jerusalem. Maybe even like picture this being written down, these lamentations happening as the smoke, like as the city's still smoldering after the devastation. Like that's the kind of time frame that we're probably looking at here. The purpose of the Book of Lamentations, there are some other things to think about here, right? So there's theological purpose in it. So there's giving a voice to grief in a faithful Godward direction. So how do we as God's people grieve the correct way, grieve faithfully? It's a model for corporate lament and repentance. It's an affirmation of God's justice, even amidst unbearable suffering. So there's just a lot of stuff to consider as we walk through this short. It's only 5 chapters. This short book of Lamentations. So these are 5 poems essentially, and they're used in communal mourning. So mourning as a community is what these are used for throughout history, really. It's used in public prayer and different liturgies throughout history. It's an invitation for Israel to weep as one unit, and so it's also been used that way throughout history. There's an annual day of mourning for the destruction of both temples that the Jews still hold, and this is so part of Lamentations will be read in the synagogues on that particular day of commemorating all of these events. The Lamentations is recited by the Jewish people today during any time of persecution and dispersion and things like that. During the Holocaust, it was an important thing for the Jewish people. It's a framework for enduring suffering under God's mysterious providence, and sometimes God's mysterious providence includes Job-like things that go on in our lives, and so this is a picture of how to walk through that in a godly way. How do we mourn the right way? As we think about Christian history, God's people fulfilled, right? The early church fathers saw in the book of Lamentations a call to repentance and mourning for sin. So that was really emphasized a lot. As we move further through church history, as the Reformers and the Puritans, this was often used. This book was often used and recited and leaned on in times of the plagues, health plagues that happened, wars that would happen, apostasy that would happen, where vast groves of people would be leaving the faith for whatever reason. Matthew Henry said, when God gives us tears, we must not suppress them. And so this is an often neglected thing, lamenting. And yet it's really increasingly relevant in an age of suffering or societal upheaval where everything is just flipped on its head. One of the things that I want to talk about really briefly, because I think it really is important, is that lament sometimes in our current world, lament is looked at, as far as the world would say it, lament is masculine and feminine, right? It's genderless. But I think sometimes in particularly in our theological family, let's say, the sort of Reformed circles that are attempting to bring back masculinity to the world, because we've been sort of attacked and hounded, our culture, all culture, a lot of cultures actually, but America for sure has been hounded by these various demonic waves of feminism, and so now there's just a lot of masculinity that is gone from our world. So there's a reaction that's happening to that within the churches that sometimes we're kind of, it can be easy, let's say, to bring back the men don't cry thing, right? And while there's some truth to the fact that men ought to have emotional control, speaking of far more than just crying, right? But men should have emotional control. Men should be able to, like shove it to the back, take care of business, and then, move forward. But there's also a reality that lament is not just a feminine thing. Okay, and I want us to guard against that right from the beginning. Lament is as masculine as it is feminine. Now, I think the actual contrast is that there's worldly lament and there's godly lament, right? Firstly, I think in the things that we lament, that's going to be a different list for the world than it ought to be for the church. But all that to say, lament is just a human response to suffering under God's sovereignty. That's all it is. It's the essence of lament is not a gendered thing. It's human expression of grief or pain or confusion directed toward God in faith. So it's not just venting. It can kind of feel like that, or see as we read some of this, it kind of seems like it might just be venting. But it's a prayer essentially, and it's shaped by trust and theology and honesty between us and our God. There are countless. There are psalms, lamentations, that are male voices, and Psalm 13, verse 1, how long, O Yahweh, will you forget me forever? This is David, right, who was the leader of the mighty men, the mighty king of Israel, who slayed Goliath and all of these things, right? This is so lament is not effeminate. Okay, Christ lamented. Isaiah 53:3 calls him a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, right? Luke 19 verse 41, he weeps over Jerusalem publicly as the king and judge. He weeps at Lazarus's tomb, famously the shortest verse in the Bible, right? He laments the cup he was about to drink, the cup of the wrath of God in the Garden of Gethsemane. In Psalm 22, which he quoted on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? So even Jesus Christ, the model man, the model of righteous masculinity, he's full of emotion, full of faith. He doesn't lose his mission or his resolve. Benjamin Bedom said, when Jesus wept, the falling tear in mercy flowed beyond all bound. Jesus wept. Jesus lamented, right? The prophets and apostles were men of lament. Jeremiah, as we're seeing here, he's the one who wrote the book entitled Lamentations. David, as we mentioned earlier, lamented. Paul in 2 Corinthians 2:4 says, for out of much affliction and anguish of heart I wrote to you with many tears. And so he wept for the churches that in the areas that he had a burden for. He wept for false teachers. He wept for sinners, as we think about Philippians 3, verse 18. So all of these examples we have in the scriptures, right, make it incredibly clear. Like biblical manhood includes lamentation. Okay? Biblical manhood includes lamentation. So I don't want you fellas who listen to or watch this to kind of hear the word lamentations and check out. Okay? This is important for all of us to understand. How do we grieve? How do we deal with pain? How do we deal with these things that we just can't understand why this would happen? When we see incredible suffering, when someone loses a child, when, like, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, how do we deal with these things in a godly way? John Owen said, it is not manly to be unfeeling. It is God honoring to mourn over what God mourns over. As he was writing on godly sorrow in that. So all that to say, right? We we want to stay away from this idea that lamentation, and particularly as we jump into this book, that this is just a feminine thing, right? That you're girly if you lament. That's just not true at all. So how do Christians read it? How do Christians apply it? Okay, I'm on about 30 minutes now. So this is, by the way, this one is probably going to be the most lengthy of the podcasts that I do. These episodes are going to be probably 45 minutes or something like that. So we're only doing it every 2 weeks. So I hope that it's helpful, even though it's a little more lengthy. So as we've talked about Lamentations, the book of Lamentations, and even lamenting, right, throughout Jewish and church history, throughout the history of God's people, let's say, and so what about now, right? Like, how should Christians read it and apply it today? What does that look like? Well, first of all, there's a Christocentric lens for it. There's we're looking through the lenses of the gospel and of Christ. That Christ wept over Jerusalem. He bore our griefs and sorrows, it says in Isaiah 53, 3 and 4. Lamentations points us to the need for a faithful sufferer who mediates, rather, for the people of God. This is he mediates for us, and he suffered on our behalf, and he's the suffering servant, famously, right? So the practical application, as I've kind of alluded to, the practical application for us as we walk through this is that it teaches us how to biblically lament, both individually, I would say, as well as corporately. It also helps the church mourn things that are unjust, sin in our society, loss in our life and family and society, and to do so in an honest way. So we're not I say honest, but because it can also be easy to lament or express sorrow in a get attention way, or in a if I do this God will bless me way, or so it can't be transactional. It's lament by its very nature is I've been crushed, and you're crying for help. You're crying for God to relieve, redeem, fix, come to the rescue, those kinds of things. So this could shape public prayer and worship in suffering. Psalm 42 is one of these. If you remember, we went through Psalms a while back, and Psalm 42 is kind of like this, right? As the deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? These things I remember, and I pour out my soul within me, for I used to go along with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with the sound of a shout of joy and thanksgiving, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you in despair, O my soul, and why are you disturbed within me? Wait for God, for I shall still praise him, for the salvation of his presence. Oh my God, my soul is in despair within me. And he goes on, right? So this is just an example of lament. And this particular book, okay, let's get to the structure real quick before I get to the end of this puppy, and hopefully we'll be kind of prepared and ready for the first chapter. I'm planning on doing this a chapter at a time, by the way, because this is basically 5 different poems, and and so it's divided into 5 chapters for us. So the first is themed really about the shame of the city, the shame that's felt of the city. So Jerusalem is personified as a grieving widow in this poem. And so it's about abandonment and public disgrace. Like they've gotten what has been coming to them, and it feels really, really bad. Chapter 2 is really about the Lord's anger in all of it. God's active judgment is the focus there, and there's emphasis on divine justice there. The key verse in that one, let's say the key verse in the first chapter would be maybe verse 12, right? Is it nothing to all you who pass by? There's just this weeping city in shame. And then in chapter 2, the key verse, because this is about, again, God's divine justice, the key verse would probably be just verse 2. The Lord has swallowed up without pity. And so that's the idea behind chapter 2. The chapter 3 is the sufferer's voice, and it's kind of the pivotal chapter that we have. It's the triple acrostic. It's a central pivot in the book, and this is the sufferer's voice. It's a lone man. Jeremiah, right, as a representative sufferer. He's suffering. He cries out to the Lord. Great is your faithfulness. His sort of theological anger. This is the famous here. Let's just go to it here. So yeah, so this is your mercies are new every morning, right? The loving kindnesses of Yahweh indeed never cease, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Yahweh is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I wait for him. So this section is chapter 3, all about God's faithfulness, suffering, remembrance, and yet hope at the same time. Chapter 4 is about the nation's fall in general. So the contrast between former glory and present ruin that has been going on. It's a description of horrific scenes during the siege. And the key verse there is probably chapter 4, verse 22. The punishment of your iniquity is accomplished. So that's a scope of chapter 4. Chapter 5, the final one, is the people's plea, is what that would probably be titled. It is not an acrostic. It's the only one. Acrostic is, like when you look in the Psalms in some of your Bibles, and Psalm 119 is for sure one of these, no matter your translation, where it has like Aleph, and then there's a part of the psalm, and then Beth, and then there's part of the psalm. They're going through the Hebrew alphabet, and it was a way to do poetry back then. Chapter 5 is the only one of these poems that is not an acrostic. It's raw, it's unstructured, it's a cry for restoration and remembrance. It ends in an unresolved way. And I think that's probably important for us. We'll get into that more, but that's an important thing. In chapter 5, verse 22, so the very end of it, the very last verse, even if you have utterly rejected us and are exceedingly angry with us. So there's it's not a cry and then a paragraph of how God answered that prayer. Okay. And that's important. And we'll get into that as we move through it. But, maybe for us, a key, thought here is that Lamentations isn't just about a ruined city. It's about a ruined people. It's about a ruined people who are seeking mercy in the ruins. It speaks across all of time, really, to every broken heart that asks, where is God in this moment? Where are you, O Lord? And that's really what it is. It's a helpful teaching, descriptor, call, all of these things. It shows us how we are to lament biblically in a godly way as men and women of God, whether it's at an individual crisis and devastation, or you look out at our nation and all of the things that are going on, the unborn being just slaughtered, and wars happening, whatever it might be, right? How do we as the people of God lament correctly and biblically? What does that look like? How do we lament in trust and hope? That's the idea. So, you don't have to follow along with this if you don't want to. I'll be walking through it bit by bit. I am going to just devote one episode for each chapter. So we'll be moving through it fairly quickly, even though fairly quickly every 2 weeks is not actually fairly quickly. But for this, it'll be fairly quickly. So we're going to hear next time. We're going to walk through chapter 1, and we're going to hear Jerusalem's cry in shame, and see how even judgment, and even in that, God invites his people to return to him. So if you want to share this with other people, go for it. This is really for our church more than anything, and so I hope that this is helpful for you. That it's at least that maybe the description of all of this is gonna make you want to check in and take in the rest of the episodes, and as we walk through Lamentations. So until next time, we'll talk to you later.